They were the city's golden couple. Hugo Thorne, the self-made tech billionaire, whose name was synonymous with ruthless success, and his beautiful wife Giada, the woman who had seemingly tamed his wild heart. Their life was a meticulously curated masterpiece of penthouse views, charity galas, and whispered envy. But behind the shimmering facade of their Manhattan paradise, a devastating secret was festering. In a single heart-shattering moment, the masterpiece would be torn to shreds, proving that the deepest betrayals often come from the hands you trust the most. This isn't just a story of heartbreak. It's a story of survival revenge and a shocking twist of fate that no one saw coming. The air in the Thorne penthouse, perched 60 floors above Central Park, always tasted of money. It was a crisp, sterile, filtered scent, a blend of the rare Japanese orchids Hugo insisted on, and the subtle, expensive perfume that clung to Giada's skin like a second thought. Their life for the past 3 years had been an exercise in flawless optics. Hugo Thorne, the wunderkind of the financial tech world, had built an empire from a single, brilliant algorithm. He was sharp, impossibly handsome, in a way that seemed genetically engineered for magazine covers, and possessed a charisma so potent it could bend rooms to his will. Giada, by contrast, was the quiet masterpiece in his collection. She had met him not in a boardroom, but in a dusty art gallery, where she was curating an exhibit for emerging artists. He had been a whirlwind, a force of nature that swept her off her feet and into a life she'd only ever read about in novels. She loved him, or rather, she loved the man he was. In the quiet moments, the rare evenings when the phones were off, his guard was down, and he would trace the lines of her palm and speak of a future that felt almost normal. Tonight, however, was not one of those nights. It was the annual Thorne Industries Autumn Gala, an event that required Giada to be more of an accessory than a wife. She stood beside Hugo near the floor-to-ceiling windows, a vision in a sapphire silk gown that matched the audacious diamond necklace, the Star of Thorne, as the press had dubbed it, he'd gifted her last anniversary. "You look breathtaking, darling," Hugo murmured, his hand a possessive weight on the small of her back. His eyes, however, weren't on her. They were scanning the room, calculating, assessing, networking, even in his praise. "Thank you, Hugo." She offered a practiced smile as a flashbulb went off nearby. Just then, Chloe danced through the crowd towards them. Chloe, her best friend since their days at NYU, was a stark and vibrant contrast to Giada. While Giada was serene and classic, Chloe was a splash of chaotic energy, all loud laughter, fiery red hair, and a dress that left little to the imagination. She was the one who had encouraged Giada to give the intimidating billionaire a chance all those years ago. There they are, the king and queen of New York. Chloe trilled, air-kissing them both. "Giada, you look like a goddess." Hugo, "You're not so bad yourself." Chloe, "You're shameless." Hugo laughed, a genuine, easy laugh he seemed to reserve only for her. Giada felt a familiar, tiny pang. It was a feeling she always quickly dismissed as insecurity. Chloe was family. She was their biggest cheerleader. But sometimes the way Hugo looked at Chloe, it was with an unguarded familiarity that he rarely showed Giada in public. Later that evening, Giada found herself cornered by the one member of the Thorne family who never seemed to fit in Ethan Hugo's younger brother. Where Hugo was a supernova, Ethan was a quiet constellation. He was a tenured professor of literature at Columbia, with kind, thoughtful eyes and a preference for tweed jackets over Tom Ford suits. Surviving the spectacle, Ethan asked, handing her a glass of water. He was the only one who seemed to notice she hadn't had a drink all night. Giada gave him a grateful smile. Just about. It's your family, and I still feel like I need a handbook. The only handbook you need is a good exit strategy. He quipped, his gaze soft. How are you, really? The simple question almost undid her. She took a deep breath, her hand instinctively going to her stomach. She and Hugo had been trying for a baby for the last year, a subject of much private tension and clinical scheduled intimacy. The stress had been immense. But 2 weeks ago, 2 faint pink lines had appeared, and a secret, fragile joy had taken root inside her. She hadn't told Hugo yet. She was waiting for the perfect moment, a quiet moment, one that felt real. I'm happy, she said, and for the first time that night, it was the unvarnished truth. She decided tonight was the night. The gala was a success. Hugo was in a triumphant mood, and her heart felt too full to keep the secret any longer. When they finally returned to the silent, sprawling emptiness of the penthouse, Hugo was already loosening his tie, his mind still buzzing from the night's conquests. We closed the Hong Kong expansion deal, he said, pouring himself a whiskey. Ferguson folded, just like I said he would. Hugo. That's amazing, Giada said, her voice soft. But I have some news, too. Something wonderful. He turned, taking a sip of his drink. Oh, did you buy another painting from one of your starving artists? The casual dismissiveness of it stung, but she pushed on. No. It's us. She took a breath. Hugo. I'm pregnant. The silence that followed was not the joyful, breathless silence she had imagined. It was heavy, suffocating. The ice in his glass clinked as his hand trembled slightly. He stared at her, his expression unreadable, and for the first time Giada felt a sliver of genuine fear. Pregnant, he repeated the word, sounding alien in his mouth. Yes, we're going to have a baby. She tried to smile to bridge the sudden, terrifying chasm that had opened between them. He drained his whiskey in one swallow and set the glass down with a sharp click. He walked to the window, his back to her, a silhouette against the glittering, indifferent city. I need some air, he said, his voice flat and cold. He walked out of the room, not to the balcony, but to the front door. Giada stood, frozen, her hand on her still flat stomach, listening to the sound of the elevator doors opening and closing, taking her husband and all of her dreams with him. He didn't come back that night, or the next. The first 48 hours were a blur of confusion and self-deception. Giada told herself he was just overwhelmed. Hugo had always been terrified of anything he couldn't control, and a baby was the ultimate variable. He needed space. He would be back. She called his phone, but it went straight to voicemail. She called his assistant, who was polite, but evasively firm. Mr. Thorne is unavailable. Chloe, of course, was her rock. She was at the penthouse within an hour of Giada's tearful call, bringing with her a pint of ice cream and a torrent of outrage on Giada's behalf. He did what Chloe raged, pacing the marble floor. He just walked out. After you told him you were pregnant. I swear, Giada, I'm going to kill him. That man, for all his billions, has the emotional intelligence of a sea slug. Giada sobbed into a cashmere throw pillow. I don't understand, Chloe. I thought this was what we both wanted. Shh, honey. It's okay. Chloe wrapped her in a hug. Men are idiots. Rich men are a special breed of idiot. He's probably holed up in some hotel having a panic attack. Give him a few days. He'll come crawling back, begging for forgiveness. They always do. Chloe's presence was a balm. She stayed for 2 days, sleeping in the guest room, fielding calls and managing the growing storm of Giada's anxiety. She made tea, she drew baths, she cursed Hugo's name with a loyalty that felt like a lifeline. On the 3rd day, Giada's phone buzzed. It was a text from a number she didn't recognize. "If you want to know where your husband is, go to the Blackwood Hotel. Penthouse B." Giada's heart hammered against her ribs. The Blackwood was a boutique hotel known for its discretion, a place for clandestine meetings and quiet affairs. "Chloe." "Look at this," she said, her hand shaking as she showed her the phone. Chloe's face hardened. "Don't you dare, Giada. It's a trick. Someone is trying to hurt you. Hugo is probably at his club sulking." "But what if he's not? What if he's in trouble? Then he can use his billions to get out of it." Chloe snapped, a little too harshly. "You are pregnant. You need to stay here and rest." "I'll go. I'll check it out, and I will read him the riot act if he's there." Giada felt a wave of relief. "Would you—" "Oh, Chloe, thank you." Chloe squeezed her hand. "Of course. That's what best friends are for. Now lock the door behind me, and don't speak to anyone." Giada waited the minutes, stretching into an eternity. An hour passed, then 2. She tried calling Chloe, but her phone, like Hugo's, went straight to voicemail. A cold, heavy dread began to pool in her stomach. Something was wrong. She couldn't stay here, a prisoner in her own home. Against every instinct for self-preservation, she called for a car and went to the Blackwood Hotel. Her hands were trembling as she walked through the opulent, hushed lobby. She didn't know what she was going to do. Knock on the door. Make a scene. She didn't have to. As she stood by the elevator bank, trying to summon the courage to go up, the doors slid open, and out they walked, Hugo and Chloe. They weren't arguing. They weren't fighting. They were laughing. Chloe was clinging to Hugo's arm, her head tilted back, her fiery hair brushing his shoulder. He was looking down at her, with that unguarded, intimate expression Giada had so often envied, the one she had foolishly believed was just friendship. As they crossed the lobby, he leaned down and kissed her, not a peck on the cheek, but a deep, lingering kiss, full of a history Giada had never known existed. The world tilted on its axis. The air rushed from Giada's lungs. The sound in her ears was a deafening roar. They didn't see her. They were in their own world, a world built on the foundations of her broken heart. She stumbled backward, bumping into a marble column, the cold stone, a shocking jolt back to reality. She turned and fled, bursting out onto the street, gasping for air that felt thick and poisonous. The betrayal was a physical thing, a blade twisting in her gut. It wasn't just that Hugo had left her. He had left her for her best friend, her sister in all but blood. How long? The question screamed in her mind. How long had this been going on? The shared jokes, the lingering glances, Chloe's constant presence, her fierce defense of Giada. Had it all been a lie? A performance? She made it back to the penthouse, the beautiful prison, now a monument to her naivety. The orchids seemed to mock her. The skyline seemed to sneer. She walked through the rooms, seeing everything with horrifying new clarity. Chloe's sweater left draped over a chair, a bottle of wine she'd brought, the kind Hugo particularly liked, the little intimacies and shared secrets of a friendship that had been a complete and utter fraud. Her grief was so profound, it turned to a cold, hard rage. She walked into Hugo's meticulously organized closet, the rows of identical suits a testament to his soulless precision. With a guttural scream, she began to tear them from their hangers, throwing them to the floor. She smashed his ridiculously expensive watches. She poured a bottle of red wine over his pristine white shirts. It was a storm of destruction, a desperate attempt to make the outside world reflect the ruin within her. In the middle of the chaos, she collapsed onto the floor, surrounded by the debris of her marriage. She was 6 weeks pregnant. She was utterly alone. And the 2 people she had loved and trusted most in the world had just burned her life to the ground. That's when her phone rang. The screen flashed with a name she had almost forgotten, Ethan Thorne. She ignored it, letting it go to voicemail. A minute later, a text came through. Giada. I heard what Hugo did. I'm so sorry. Please don't be alone right now. I'm outside your building. Just tell the doorman to let me up. I'll wait. She stared at the text, her tears blurring the words. She had no one, no best friend, no husband, but maybe, just maybe, she had a brother. Giada let him wait for 20 minutes. It was a petty act of control in a life that had spiraled utterly out of it. She sat on the floor of her ruined closet, listening to the silence, wondering if he would give up and leave. He didn't. Finally, with a sigh that felt like it came from the depths of her soul, she picked up the intercom and told the doorman to send him up. When Ethan walked in, he didn't flinch at the sight before him. He took in the trashed living room, the wine-stained wreckage of the closet, and finally Giada crumpled on the floor like a discarded doll. His face was a mask of profound sorrow, not for the material possessions, but for her. He didn't speak. He simply walked over, sat on the floor across from her, and slid a container of takeout soup onto the rug between them. It was matzo ball soup from a deli downtown she'd once told him she loved. I figured you hadn't eaten, he said softly. That simple act of kindness did what the betrayal. Hadn't it made her break completely? A racking, ugly sob tore from her chest, and she doubled over, the pain too immense to contain. Ethan moved closer, not touching her, but just being there, a solid, unwavering presence in the storm. He told the family this morning, Ethan said, his voice laced with disgust. In a conference call, no less, as if it were a corporate merger. Giada and I are separating. I'll be with Chloe now. The lawyers will handle the rest. The lawyers? Giada whispered, her voice hoarse. He's divorcing me. Yes. Ethan's jaw tightened. And apparently my mother is more concerned about the Thorne Industries stock price than the fact that her son is a monster. For the next few hours, as the city lights began to glitter outside, Giada talked. She told him everything. The pregnancy announcement, Hugo's cold departure, the text seeing them at the hotel. She purged the poison, the words tumbling out in a torrent of grief and fury. Ethan listened, his quiet attention a lifeline. He never once said, "I told you so," or "I never liked him," even though the sentiment was plain in his eyes. Chloe. Giada choked on the name. She was my sister. She was here, Ethan. She held me while I cried over him, knowing she was the reason he was gone. Some people are black holes, Giada, Ethan said, his voice heavy. They just consume everything good around them, My brother has always been one. It seems he's found his match. In the days that followed, Ethan became her shadow, her protector. Hugo's lawyers, a pitiless and efficient firm, began their assault. Formal letters arrived. Her credit cards were cancelled. A formidable man in a suit appeared to inform her that Mr. Thorne required her to vacate the penthouse within 30 days. She was being erased. Ethan was the one who found her a lawyer, a sharp, empathetic woman who specialized in fighting powerful men. He was the one who helped her pack, sorting through the remnants of her life, never judging, never rushing. He packed her art books and the canvases from her starving artists with more care than he packed anything else. One rainy Tuesday, as they were taping up the last of the boxes, Giada sank onto the bare mattress, the only piece of furniture left in the cavernous bedroom. The scale of her new reality was crushing. She was pregnant, jobless, and soon to be homeless or locked in a legal battle with a billionaire who held all the cards. "I can't do this," she whispered, tears tracking silently down her cheeks. "I have nothing, Ethan. He took everything." Ethan knelt in front of her, his expression serious. "No, he didn't. He took things. He took a building and a bank account. He didn't take your strength. He didn't take your intelligence. And he damn well didn't take that baby." He gestured to her stomach. "That is yours. And that is everything." The conviction in his voice startled her. He saw a strength in her that she couldn't see in herself. They moved her into a modest 2-bedroom apartment in the West Village that Ethan had found through a university colleague. It was small, the floors creaked, and the view was of a brick wall. But it was safe. It was hers. Ethan helped her unpack, stocking her fridge and assembling a crib. They fell into a comfortable domestic rhythm. He would come over after his classes bringing groceries or just his quiet company. They'd eat dinner sitting on the floor. Because she didn't have a table yet, talking about books, art, and everything except Hugo. He made her feel human again. She began to see the man he was separate from his infamous family. He was brilliant, but humble, kind, without agenda. He had his father's intelligence, but his mother's heart, a combination the rest of the Thornes seemed to view as a weakness. Giada saw it as his greatest strength. A dangerous, unfamiliar warmth began to bloom in her chest whenever he was near. About 2 months after the split on a cold, miserable night, the loneliness became acute. The pregnancy was making her emotional, and the weight of it all pressed down on her. She called Ethan, her voice thick with tears, not even sure what she wanted. "I'll be right there," he said. No questions asked. He arrived with a bottle of non-alcoholic sparkling cider and 2 glasses. They sat on her new sofa, the silence thick with unspoken emotions. "Thank you, Ethan," she said, looking at him. Really looking at him. "I don't know what I would have done without you." "You would have been fine," he said, his eyes searching hers. "You're the strongest person I know." "No, I'm not. I'm a mess. I'm a charity case living off my brother-in-law's kindness." "Never," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Don't ever call yourself that." He reached out his thumb, gently wiping a tear from her cheek. His touch was electric, a spark of warmth in the cold emptiness of her life. The air crackled. The months of shared grief, quiet support, and growing affection coalesced in that single moment. She leaned in, and he met her halfway. The kiss wasn't born of passion or lust, but of a desperate shared loneliness and a profound, burgeoning love. It was gentle questioning, and it felt more real than any of the performative embraces she had shared with Hugo. They broke apart, both of them, breathless and startled. "Giada." He began, his voice thick with a mixture of awe and regret. "I know," she whispered. They knew they had crossed a line. A beautiful, terrifying, and irreversible line. In the quiet of her little apartment, surrounded by the boxes of her old life, Giada realized she wasn't just falling out of love with one thorn brother. She was falling deeply, dangerously in love with another. And in that moment of shared vulnerability, a single act of comfort and desperation, a new secret was forged, one that would prove to be far more consequential than the one that had destroyed her marriage. The morning after the kiss was awkward. The air in the small apartment was thick with unspoken words. Ethan left early, a mumbled apology on his lips, leaving Giada alone with her churning thoughts. They had made a mistake. A beautiful, heartfelt mistake, but a mistake nonetheless. It was too soon, too complicated. She was pregnant with his brother's child. He was the brother of the man she was in a bitter divorce with. The world would see it as a sordid act of revenge, not the desperate reach for comfort it had been. They tacitly agreed to pull back. Their relationship returned to one of careful, supportive friendship, but the electricity of that night hummed beneath every conversation, every shared glance. The secret bound them together, even as they tried to keep a respectable distance. Giada, now in her second trimester, knew she couldn't survive on Ethan's kindness forever. She needed to build a life for herself and her baby. The fire that Hugo had tried to extinguish was rekindled not by rage, but by purpose. She took the small settlement her lawyer had managed to secure from Hugo's initial lowball offer. He wanted a quick, quiet divorce, and a fight was bad for his image, and invested it all in herself. Drawing on her background, she started a small online art consultancy called New Dawn Gallery. She specialized in representing the very artists Hugo had mocked, emerging talented and overlooked. She built a website from her sofa, conducted meetings via video call, and used her impeccable eye to connect new collectors with affordable, brilliant art. It was grueling work fueled by prenatal vitamins and a fierce desire to prove she was more than just Mrs. Hugo Thorne. Meanwhile, Hugo and Chloe were conducting a scorched earth campaign on her reputation. They were the new darlings of the gossip columns, photographed everywhere from St. Bart's to the ski slopes of Gstad. In a carefully curated interview for a glossy magazine, Chloe, dripping with faux sincerity, spoke of Hugo's unhappiness in his marriage, and how she had simply been there to support her two best friends. The implication was clear. Giada was unstable, cold, and had driven her husband away. Hugo, for his part, played the role of the reluctant victim of a loveless marriage finally finding happiness. The stories hurt, but they also fueled Giada's resolve. Every glowing article about them was another shovelful of coal into the furnace of her ambition. Ethan was her silent partner in this fight. He'd send her links to business articles, proofread her proposals, and listen patiently as she vented about the latest public relations stunt Hugo and Chloe had pulled. As her belly grew, so did her business. She made her first big sale, a series of hauntingly beautiful paintings by a young artist from Brooklyn, to a well-known hotelier. The commission was more money than she had ever earned on her own. It was a victory that tasted sweeter than any of Hugo's diamonds. The pregnancy was not easy. The stress of the divorce, the long hours, and the emotional turmoil took their toll. There were scares, a bout of high blood pressure, a false alarm that sent her rushing to the hospital in a panic. And through it all, Ethan was there. He was the one who drove her to doctor's appointments, who assembled the ridiculously complicated baby furniture, who sat with her in the emergency room, holding her hand and telling her terrible jokes until she smiled. He never overstepped. He never mentioned the kiss. But his devotion was a silent, powerful statement. He was in this with her no matter what. He was falling in love not with the idea of her, but with the reality of her, a tired, stressed, fiercely independent woman building a new life from scratch. One evening, when she was nearly 8 months pregnant, Ethan arrived to find her crying over a legal letter. Hugo was petitioning for predefined extensive custody rights to the child upon its birth. He wants 50-50 custody. She wept, the paper trembling in her hand. He wants to name the baby Hugo Thorne Jr. He wants to dictate his schooling, his holidays. He hasn't asked me once, not once, how I'm feeling, or if the baby is healthy. It's just another acquisition for him, another asset for the Thorne empire. Ethan read the letter, his face turning to stone. He will not have this child, Giada. I will not let him. How can you stop him? He's the father. He has every right. The look on Ethan's face was one of such profound pain that it silenced her. Some rights aren't earned by biology, he said, his voice low and intense. They're earned by being there, by caring, by loving. He has done none of that. The final month was a siege. Hugo's lawyers became more aggressive, demanding updates on her health, insisting on being informed the moment she went into labor. He was trying to control the narrative to position himself as the concerned father-to-be. Giada, with Ethan's steadfast support, walled herself off. She changed her phone number. She communicated only through her lawyer. She focused on the life growing inside her, a life she would protect with the ferocity of a lioness. The night her water broke, it was a dark, stormy Tuesday. She called the 2 numbers in her emergency contacts, her doctor and Ethan. He was there in 15 minutes, his face pale with worry, but his hands steady as he helped her down the stairs and into a taxi. In the sterile, white hospital room, as the contractions grew in intensity, the noise of the outside world faded away. There was no Hugo, no Chloe, no lawyers. There was only the primal, overwhelming task of bringing her son into the world. And Ethan was there, holding her hand, wiping her brow. His voice a constant, calming presence in the storm of her pain. He was her anchor, her partner in the truest sense of the word. As dawn broke over the city after 18 hours of grueling labor, Giada gave birth to a beautiful, healthy baby boy. He had a tuft of dark hair and a surprisingly loud cry. As the nurse placed the baby on her chest, Giada wept not from pain or sadness, but from a love so fierce and absolute it eclipsed everything else. She looked up at Ethan, his face streaked with his own tears. He looked at the baby, then at her, and his smile was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. "He's perfect, Giada," he whispered. "What's his name?" She looked down at her son who had been conceived in a cold, loveless marriage, but carried through a season of unexpected love and support. She thought of Hugo's arrogant demand to name him Hugo Jr. A small, triumphant smile touched her lips. "His name," she said, her voice clear and strong, "is Oliver James, and his last name is my maiden name. He's Oliver James Bell." In that moment, she wasn't just a mother. She was free. The first 72 hours of Oliver's life were a sacred, quiet bubble, a world unto themselves. The chaotic symphony of the city, the lingering trauma of the past 9 months, the impending legal battles, all of it faded into a muted background hum. Giada's universe had contracted to the size of the hospital bed, to the warmth of her son's tiny body against her chest, to the soft milky scent of his skin. She studied every perfect detail of his face, the impossibly long eyelashes that rested on his plump cheeks, the way his miniature fingers curled instinctively around hers, the tuft of dark hair as soft as silk. This was Oliver James Bell, and he was a miracle. Ethan was the gentle guardian of their peace. He moved with a quiet reverence, a man in awe. He seemed to understand that this fragile new world was not his to enter, but to protect. He acted as a gatekeeper, intercepting the ostentatious PR-driven flower arrangements that began arriving from the office of Hugo Thorne, and politely but firmly turning away the hospital's well-meaning but intrusive social liaisons. He brought Giada real food, strong coffee and trashy magazines, small comforts that felt like monumental acts of love. When he held Oliver for the first time, his large, capable hands looking almost comical, holding such a tiny being, Giada saw a look of such profound, unguarded tenderness on his face that it made her heart ache with a beautiful, complicated pain. Their unspoken secret. The kiss that had changed everything hovered between them, not as a source of tension, but as a shared, invisible thread connecting the three of them. But they both knew the bubble was fragile, destined to burst. On the afternoon they were due to be discharged, as Giada was carefully dressing Oliver in a soft, simple sleeper. A shadow fell across the doorway. It wasn't a knock, it was an arrival. Hugo Thorne stood there, a figure of such jarring, tailored perfection that he seemed to suck all the warmth and air from the room. He was flanked by his two legal sentinels, severe men in dark suits whose expressions were devoid of emotion. And lingering behind them, a nervous phantom clinging to the edge of the scene, was Chloe. Her expensive dress seemed ill-fitting, her makeup a brittle mask over her anxiety. Giada Hugo began his voice, a smooth, polished stone of condescension. He didn't look at her. His eyes immediately tried to locate the baby. "I was told you'd gone into labor." A simple courtesy call from my brother was apparently too much to ask. Giada's arms instinctively tightened around Oliver, her body forming a protective shield. Every maternal instinct screamed at her to flee, to hide her son from this man's contaminating presence. Ethan, who had been packing Giada's bag, straightened up instantly, his entire posture shifting from relaxed to rigid. He moved without a thought, a solid, immovable object placing himself between Hugo and the bed. "This is a private hospital room." "Hugo, it's not a boardroom," Ethan said, his voice low and laced with a cold fury Giada had never heard from him before. "You are not welcome here." Hugo's gaze flickered to his brother, a spark of irritation in his eyes. "Ethan, still playing the white knight for lost causes, I see. Move aside. I'm here to see my son." He made a move to step around Ethan, his focus unwavering like a predator locking onto its prey. It was then that Chloe's voice, thin and reedy, pierced the tension. "He's so little, Hugo." She murmured a statement of such obvious, hollow sentiment that it was almost pathetic. She was trying to play her part, the supportive partner, but her heart clearly wasn't in it. "You don't have a son here." Giada's voice cut through the air, stronger than she expected, fueled by a surge of pure adrenaline. "You forfeited that right 9 months ago. This is my son." A smirk, infuriating and arrogant, played on Hugo's lips. "Oh, don't be so melodramatic, Giada. It doesn't suit you. I'm here to do the right thing, to be the bigger person. I'm here to give him my name. The Thorne name. A name that will ensure he never wants for anything. He doesn't need your name, Ethan retorted, his jaw tight. He has a mother who loves him. That's more than you can say. The barb struck home. Hugo's face darkened, the smooth facade cracking for a second. This conversation doesn't involve you, little brother. This is between me and her. He turned his full, formidable attention back to Giada. I am his puta. That is a biological fact. I have rights. And I've come to see him. No, Giada said again, the single word, a declaration of war. Hugo's legendary temper, always simmering just beneath his cool exterior, finally boiled over. The control was gone. Don't be ridiculous. I'm not asking you, Giada. I'm telling you I want a paternity test. Right now. We'll make everything official, get the paperwork in order, and put an end to any of your sentimental games. His arrogance was a physical force pressing down on her. He didn't have a single doubt. The test for him was not a search for truth, but a legal rubber stamp, a formality to confirm his ownership of this new asset. He would frame the certificate, another trophy for his collection. And in that moment, seeing the smug certainty on his face and the flicker of absolute terror in Ethan's eyes, Giada saw her path with blinding clarity. She had been on the defensive for 9 long months, absorbing his blows, reacting to his moves. No more. The secret she and Ethan had guarded, the one she carried, with a mix of shame and hope, was not a weakness. It was a trump card, and Hugo in his hubris was demanding she play it. A profound, almost preternatural calm settled over her. She took a deep breath, letting it out slowly, meeting Hugo's furious gaze with an unnerving placidity. A paternity test, she repeated, her voice even and measured. You're absolutely certain that's what you want, Hugo? Of course, I'm sure, he scoffed, misinterpreting her calm as a sign of imminent surrender. Let's just get it over with. Fine, Giada stated, her voice as cool and sharp as ice. But on my terms, we do it now with a hospital lab technician, and we all stay in this room until the results are ready. You, me, Chloe, Ethan. Your lawyers can stand witness. We'll have the hospital's head of obstetrics deliver the results personally. A statutory declaration. No games, Hugo, just as you said. Just the unvarnished truth. Can you handle that? Confident of the outcome, Hugo gave a curt, dismissive nod. Whatever it takes. The next hour was an agonizing masterclass in tension. A lab technician, her face a neutral mask, came and went, taking the gentle swab from a sleeping Oliver's cheek, and a perfunctory, almost rough one from Hugo. The 6 of them sat in the cramped, sterile room, trapped in a suffocating silence. The only sounds were the soft hum of the hospital machinery and Oliver's gentle breathing. Hugo paced like a caged tiger, checking the time on his Patek Philippe every few minutes. Chloe sat huddled in a chair, her face ashen, looking as though she might be physically sick. Ethan stood by Giada's side, a silent, unmovable sentinel. He placed his hand on her shoulder, a gesture of blind faith. He had no idea what she was planning, but he trusted her completely. Finally, the door opened. Dr. Albright, the head of the maternity ward, entered. She was a stern, no-nonsense woman in her late 50s, and she held a single, sealed manila envelope. Hugo's lawyers straightened their ties, shifting into position like runners at a starting block. I have the results of the paternal DNA comparison for the child, Oliver James Bell. Dr. Albright announced, her voice formal and devoid of inflection as she broke the seal. Hugo smiled. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated triumph, the smile of a man who had never lost a battle he truly cared to win. And he prompted the word dripping with impatience. Dr. Albright scanned the document in her hand. She looked up, her gaze bypassing Hugo entirely and landing directly on Giada. A flicker of something unreadable surprised respect. Perhaps even a hint of complicity flashed in her eyes before her professional mask slipped back into place. She cleared her throat, letting the silence stretch, drawing out the moment. Based on the analysis performed, she began, her voice ringing with clinical authority, the probability of paternity for the alleged father, Mr. Hugo Thorne. She paused again, a masterful theatrical beat that had every person in the room holding their breath. Is 0%. The words dropped into the silent room like stones into a perfectly still pond, the ripples of their meaning spreading outward in devastating waves. Chloe let out a strangled gasp, her hand flying to her mouth. Hugo's triumphant smile froze, then cracked and shattered, replaced by a mask of slack-jawed, absolute disbelief. What he stammered, the sound of foreign, pathetic noise coming from him. That's impossible. It's a mistake. Run the test again. The test is 99.99% accurate, Mr. Thorne. Dr. Albright stated coolly, her expression unyielding. There is no mistake. You are not the father of this child. Hugo's head snapped toward Giada, his face a maelstrom of confusion, morphing into pure, unbridled rage. What is this? What kind of trick are you playing? His voice began to rise, echoing in the small space. Who is it? Who is the father? He roared, the sound bouncing off the sterile walls. Giada didn't flinch. She held his wild, furious gaze, her heart pounding a triumphant rhythm against her ribs. She had endured 9 months of his cruelty, his indifference, his public campaign to paint her as the villain. This was her moment. This was justice. She said nothing. She simply let her gaze drift from Hugo's contorted face and settle softly and deliberately on Ethan. And Hugo, his mind racing, followed her gaze. He saw his brother, his quiet, academic, inconsequential little brother, standing beside the woman he had discarded. He saw the look on Ethan's face, a complex tapestry of shock, fear, and a slowly dawning, earth-shattering comprehension. The pieces began to slam into place in Hugo's mind with the force of a physical blow. Ethan's constant presence, his quiet devotion, the way he looked at her, the way she looked at him. The hot rage on Hugo's face instantly cooled, curdling into something far more toxic and pathetic, the profound, soul-crushing wound of a narcissist who has been utterly and completely decentered. You, Hugo whispered the word laced with a venomous disbelief, all of his rage now focused on his brother. You. Ethan met his brother's hateful stare. The initial shock receded, replaced by a quiet, steely resolve he never knew he possessed. He looked at Giada, at her incredible courage. He looked at the beautiful, perfect baby boy in her arms. His son. He had been prepared to love this child as his own forever. But fate, in its infinite and mysterious wisdom, had delivered a truth more profound than he had ever dreamed. He straightened to his full height, and for the first time in his life, he felt taller than his brother. He was no longer the afterthought, the black sheep. He was a father. He was a partner. He was the one who had stayed. Yes, Hugo. Ethan said, his voice clear and unwavering, ringing with a finality that shattered what was left of Hugo's world. Me. The silence that descended upon the hospital room in the wake of Hugo's exit was deafening, a vacuum left by a collapsed star. The air, once crackling with tension, was now thick with the dust of shattered realities. Hugo hadn't just walked out. He had evaporated, his immense presence dissolving into nothingness against the stark, undeniable truth. His lawyer's men, paid to command and control, had looked like startled birds, their briefcases suddenly seeming like flimsy props as they scurried to follow the ghost of their client. Chloe remained a statue of horrified realization, carved by the doorway. The vibrant, chaotic energy that was her signature had been extinguished, leaving behind a pale, trembling woman. Her eyes, bitter and vacant, darted from the empty doorway to Giada, who was now a portrait of serene power, cradling the son Chloe had believed was her ticket to a permanent place in the Thorne dynasty. The baby wasn't an heir. He was a symbol of her spectacular miscalculation. He was proof that she had traded her soul-deep friendship with Giada, not for a king, but for a jester. A sob, dry and ragged, escaped her lips. She didn't look at Ethan. She couldn't. He was a variable she had never bothered to compute. With a final haunted glance at Giada, a look that begged for an absolution Giada no longer possessed, Chloe turned and fled. Her heels clicking a frantic, desperate rhythm down the polished hospital corridor, chasing a future that had just vanished. Alone at last, in the sacred quiet, Giada and Ethan's gazes finally met. The chasm of secrets and unspoken feelings that had separated them for months was now gone, bridged by a single stunning revelation. It was a moment so profound it seemed to alter the very light in the room. Ethan, Giada whispered her voice, a fragile mix of wonder and relief. Her hand trembled as she adjusted Oliver's blanket. I had to do it. His arrogance, the way he looked at Oliver like a stock option. She took a shaky breath. I didn't know for sure. I only hoped. After that one night, I counted the weeks over and over. It seemed possible, but I was too afraid to believe it. Ethan moved closer, his feet feeling leaden, his heart hammering against his ribs. He sank to his knees beside her bed, his eyes fixed on the tiny, perfect face of the baby. Oliver. His son. The words were a silent, earth-shattering explosion in his mind. He had spent months steeling himself to be the loving uncle, the supportive friend, the man who would stand in the shadow of his brother's biological claim and love this child fiercely and quietly. He had been prepared to find his joy in the margins. It doesn't matter when you knew, he said, his voice thick with an emotion so overwhelming it almost stole his breath. He reached out a hesitant hand, his finger gently tracing the soft curve of Oliver's cheek. The baby stirred his tiny mouth, making a soft cooing sound. I would have loved him no matter what. I already did from the moment you told me you were pregnant. He looked up at her, then his eyes. Those kind, thoughtful eyes she had come to rely on, shining with a brilliant, tear-filled light. But this, Giada, what you've just given me, this is a miracle. He wasn't just talking about the baby. He was talking about the freedom, the legitimacy, the unbelievable gift of a future he had never dared to imagine. The news of the paternity test detonated with the force of a bomb in the exclusive, insulated world of the Thorne family and their peers. The story was simply too perfect in its karmic cruelty. Hugo Thorne, the titan of industry, the master manipulator, had been publicly cast as the cuckolded fool. The narrative he and Chloe had so carefully crafted of a tragic hero escaping a cold marriage was inverted overnight. He was now the villain who had callously abandoned his pregnant wife for her best friend, only to be dealt the ultimate checkmate. The tabloids feasted. Business rivals smirked over their morning papers. The name Thorn, once a symbol of untouchable power, was now the punchline to a very public, very expensive joke. Hugo's public humiliation was total. He became a recluse, his name vanishing from the society pages and financial news. His company's stock faltered not from mismanagement, but because the myth of its founder's infallible judgment had been irrevocably broken. His relationship with Chloe, built on the treacherous ground of shared betrayal, crumbled into dust. There were no more glamorous trips, no more triumphant galas. There was only the bitter silence of the penthouse, haunted by the ghosts of their choices. She left him within a month, her dreams of being the next Mrs. Thorne, turning to ash in her mouth. In a surprising turn, it was the Thorne matriarch, Eleanor, who made the first move. A woman forged from iron and pragmatism, she cared little for feelings but everything for legacy. The scandal was an embarrassment, but the existence of a grandson, a direct male heir from the son she had always deemed too soft, was a fact she could not ignore. She called Ethan. The conversation was stilted, stripped of warmth, but it was a beginning. A trust was established for Oliver, and tentative invitations to family gatherings were extended. Giada and Ethan accepted them cautiously, not for social validation, but to ensure Oliver would know his family on their own terms, free from the toxicity of his uncle. For Giada, life settled into a rhythm that was more beautiful than any symphony she had ever imagined. The chaos receded, replaced by the steady, quiet hum of a life well lived. Her art consultancy, New Dawn Gallery, became a quiet force in the art world. Collectors trusted her eye and her integrity. Artists sought her out. She was no longer Hugo Thorne's beautiful wife. She was Giada Bell, a name she had reclaimed, a name that stood for taste, resilience, and success earned through passion and hard work. Her West Village apartment, once a refuge from a storm, transformed into a true home. It smelled of coffee and old books of baby shampoo and the lavender lotion Ethan used. It was a space filled not with expensive, curated objects, but with life. Oliver's brightly colored playmat dominated the living room floor. Ethan's literature textbooks were stacked on the coffee table, and Giada's art catalogues were spread across the dining table that Ethan had assembled one sunny Saturday. Their love story unfolded not in grand gestures, but in the small, sacred moments of everyday life. It was in the way he'd take Oliver in the early mornings, so she could sleep for an extra hour. It was in the way she'd bring him a cup of tea, just as he liked it, when he was grading papers late into the night. It was a partnership forged in the crucible of crisis, now tempered into a bond of profound respect and deep, abiding love. They were two survivors who had found their harbor in each other. One crisp autumn afternoon, almost a year to the day, she had faced Hugo in that hospital room Giada was in the park. The leaves were a riot of gold and red, and Oliver's delighted squeals echoed in the air as she pushed him on the swings. Ethan came up behind her, his familiar warmth a comforting presence before his arms even encircled her waist. He rested his chin on her shoulder, and together they watched their son soar. "Do you ever think about it all?" Giada asked, her voice a soft murmur against the backdrop of the park. The penthouse seems like a different lifetime, like a story I read about someone else. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the pure, unadulterated joy on their son's face. I think about the man I was. He admitted, his voice low and reflective. The quiet professor, always on the sidelines of my own family's drama. I never thought a life like this was possible for me. He tightened his embrace, pulling her closer. Everything that happened, Giada, every single terrible, painful moment, it was all just the long, complicated road that led me right here to this park with you and our son. He turned his head and pressed a gentle kiss to her temple. It led me home, and I wouldn't change a single step of the journey. Giada leaned back against his solid frame, a slow, genuine smile spreading across her face. The ghosts of the past were finally gone, banished by the bright, warm light of the present. The gilded cage was a distant memory. This right here was real life. This was freedom. This was a love story richer than any fortune a family built from the ashes, stronger and more precious than anything she had ever dared to dream. What a journey. Giada's story proves that sometimes your life has to be completely demolished to find out what it's truly made of. She lost a millionaire, but she gained a universe. It's a powerful reminder that true wealth isn't about penthouse views or diamond necklaces. It's about loyalty, resilience, and the family you build in the most unexpected ways. Her story is one of ultimate justice, where the people who tried to break her only succeeded in making her unbreakable. If Giada's journey from devastating heartbreak to triumphant love moved you, please hit that like button to show your support. Don't forget to share this video with someone who needs a reminder that new beginnings are always possible. And for more incredible, true-life stories of survival justice and the surprising ways the heart can heal, make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next.